When I saw that challenge, I was like, who am I to teach? Like, I don't have any credentials. I haven't gone to school to get a master's or something so that I can actually teach other people. So that was the first hump that I had to get over. Anyone can teach as long as you know something. Like, if you have knowledge to share, you can teach it.
Hey Hatchlings, welcome to the Motion Hatch podcast. I'm your host, Hayley Akins. Hey Hatchlings, thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of the Motion Hatch podcast. Now, this is actually part of a mini-series that we're doing called Making Money in Mograph. So we're talking to motion designers who maybe have unusual jobs in the industry or make money in different ways, such as making tools and scripts for After Effects. We're also talking about alternative revenue streams and passive income. So there's loads of great stuff in here. If you haven't already, please do go back and listen to the past two episodes, episode 31 and 32. Because they were also part of this series. We spoke to Adam Plouffe and Zach Lovett, and they were really awesome too. On this week's episode, we spoke to Jake Bartlett. Now, he teaches motion design on Skillshare, and he also teaches a couple of School of Motion courses. We spoke to him about what it's like to teach motion design. He gave us loads of behind-the-scenes info on what it takes to build these courses, and also how he makes money doing that. So it was really, really interesting. I know you're going to really enjoy it. Hey, Jake, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So you're a motion designer, but you also make money teaching motion design. How did you get started doing that?
That's actually kind of funny because I didn't really pursue it. My wife found a website called Skillshare back before I started teaching, and it was early on in their history, but she kind of acquired a lot of credits just because she had a very popular Pinterest account and they kind of had a referral program. So she was like, you should take a look at my account and just see if there's any classes you might want to take. And at the time, there were maybe 3 classes regarding animation. So I watched one of them that was on character animation. It was pretty cool. So I got exposed to the platform that way. And eventually, they put out a teach challenge that was open to anyone who wanted to apply and basically make a course outline. That's all you had to do was make like a proposal for what your class would be. And you'd be entered into a contest to win a MacBook Air. And so at that point, like, I always thought I would enjoy teaching. I just never thought it was something that I could pursue as a viable career option, just because I was a motion designer. I'd been working at a production company and I was like, there's no way I can make that amount of money as a teacher. But I was like, well, maybe this would be a good way to test teaching online instead of teaching in person. And so I put a proposal together, and of course they picked mine, I won, and then I had to make the class. That was the next step. So I kind of by default got pushed into teaching on Skillshare that way. And my course ended up doing really well. It was very well received, but that was the only class I taught for that first year. I just let it sit there and it kind of tapered off at the end of the year to the point where it wasn't really making me any money, but I figured it was nice while it lasted. I got a couple $1,000s out of that year period, and I won a MacBook Air. It was, totally fine if that was the end of my teaching career. But I had, over that same year, started taking freelance work on the side. So on nights and weekends while I was working my day job, and kind of realizing that I could probably be working for myself. So it actually happened to be on the day that I quit my job to go freelance full-time. Skillshare reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in teaching a second class. And they offered me a bunch of support. They were putting together this team of basically their top teachers to just make a Slack channel, basically, where they were very available to us and making it easy for us to get support from them. And so I was like, well, why not? It was fun the first time. Let's do another class. And the rest is basically history. From there, my classes just continued to kind of snowball. And I started building a pretty big following on their platform. And between Skillshare and my freelance, I was making more money than I was at my production company job. And I actually got my wife to start teaching just before we had our first son. So Skillshare was a very, very big part of my career shift and continues to this day.
Did you think that you could make money on that platform? Because I know that it kind of works in somewhat of an unusual way. It's like a royalty-based thing. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, like I said at the beginning, like when my first class tapered off, I was like, it was nice while it lasted, because at that time, you paid as a student for every class that you took, and the teacher determined the cost of every class. So I think I put mine up for $19. I think that's what they suggested that I do my class at. And like I said, I made a couple $1,000s over a year period, but eventually that tapered off. At the same time that they asked me if I wanted to teach a second class, they told me they were going to start experimenting with a subscription model where they were going to gather a select number of classes and offer it those specific classes as part of a subscription. That went over really, really well with students. And eventually they just converted completely over to that system. So instead of being paid directly a percentage of every enrollment, it turned into a subscription model with royalties. And at the beginning, it was per enrollment. So students enrolling in your classes was all that mattered in terms of how it converted into you getting paid. Eventually, some teachers started noticing that if they kind of just shared enrollments, they could start feeding off of each other and getting some income, even though their class quality wasn't that high. So to cut down on that, they implemented some behind the scenes stuff with kind of like machine learning and getting spam classes out of the platform, but also instead of being per student or per enrollment being the deciding factor of how much you get paid, it's now per minute watched, which is, I'm pretty sure, the same model as YouTube, but it's basically ensuring that the classes that are actually getting watched, the teachers who made those classes are the ones who are actually being rewarded for it. Unfortunately, that means that if your classes are short, which in the case of my wife, her classes were between maybe 10 and 30 minutes long, the value of her classes being watched dropped a lot. My classes and she teaches Photoshop and Illustrator. She did very short, bite-sized tutorial style classes. My classes are After Effects, animation. They're naturally much longer. So the average length of my classes are between an hour and 2 hours. So it actually really helped me and really hurt my wife. And so since they changed that over, we've just, adapted and made her next classes longer. I've continued to make my classes as long as I can, so long as the content in them is good. But basically, all of that to say, the royalty pool works basically between 30 and 50% of the money coming in from paying subscribers is divided up to all of the teachers every month based on how much of their classes were watched. So it's literally the culmination of the minutes of all of your classes watched gets factored into that royalty pool, and that's how you're paid.
That's really interesting, because I was just thinking about how I've heard when you're teaching, sometimes the best way to do things isn't to like make stuff really long and things like that. So it's quite like funny. But like you say, with animation, it tends to be longer stuff anyway. I kind of wanted to zoom back a little bit because I wanted to talk about when you first started it and you won that competition to do the first class. I mean, obviously you must have had something there. Like you must have thought like, oh, okay, like I know what I'm doing a bit. That's because your wife was already doing it, right? So did she give you some tips and stuff like that on what they might be looking for in a class?
Well, she wasn't teaching at that point. She was just a student. I mean, she never in her wildest dreams at that point thought that she could teach. She thought I could teach. I always thought that I could. I always feel like I've been good at explaining things in a way that people understand them. But at the same time, when I saw that challenge, I was like, who am I to teach? Like, I don't have any credentials. Like, I haven't gone to school to get a master's or something so that I can actually teach other people. So that was the first hump that I had to get over. Anyone can teach as long as you know something. Like, if you have knowledge to share, you can teach it. And like I said, I felt like I had a pretty good way of explaining things. So that production company job that I worked for almost 5 years was mainly animating text, a lot of text animation on a daily basis. And so I thought, if there's anything in After Effects that I feel like I'm expertly qualified to be able to teach, it would be text animation, kinetic text. That was really, really big in 2010, 2012. I mean, it really is today too, but that was something that I felt comfortable in. So that's what I built my outline around. And clearly people connected with it because it went over well. And so after that year period, and they asked me to do a second class, I was like, well, I went back to that feeling of, well, I don't feel qualified to teach anything else, but I kind of just thought about it and just picked another topic, which was shape layers in After Effects that I felt like at that time not many people were using, at least not to their full potential. So I made a course built all around shape layers. And from there, I just started having more and more ideas of, well, I could teach a beginner's class that's kind of like an intro for people who are maybe designers that have access to After Effects, but have never had the confidence to open it up. And then hand lettering was a really big topic. So I was like, well, I should market to them and I'll make a hand lettering animation class. And so it kind of just, like I said, snowballed from there, and just one idea after the other. It just became fun. And I kind of just followed whatever I was finding fun myself. If I could find excitement and interest in teaching something, I figured students are probably going to be interested too.
Do you have any tips or anything if someone is like, oh, maybe I want to teach something? And like, it doesn't have to be on Skillshare, right? Like, I
Right.
know a lot of people do tutorials on YouTube and stuff like that as well. And obviously, like, that's free. Like on YouTube, you might get money from ads and stuff, but I think
Right.
you have to have like loads and loads of subscribers and stuff to do that. But either or, like, what would your advice be if someone wanted to kind of outline a class?
It really does depend on where you want to teach, because Skillshare has its own set of guidelines that you need to follow. Like all of Skillshare's classes are project based. So the student has to have something that they can make through your class. And there are other teaching platforms like Udemy, which I don't believe they have that kind of requirement, but you're paying for every class. So it's not a subscription like Skillshare is. So you kind of need to do research first on where you think you might want to teach. Obviously, I'm biased towards Skillshare. I love that platform. It's obviously been very successful for me, but it's great because it's open to anyone. You can create an account and start teaching. No, background checks or anything like that. You just jump right in and see how you do. So I guess one big suggestion, let's just use Skillshare as an example for teaching on that platform. If you have a topic that you want to teach, but you feel like other people have already taught it, that should not be a hindrance to you, because if other people have taught something and it's done well, that means that students are interested in that type of content. And in my experience, I've noticed that even just as a student, I've noticed that watching multiple people's takes on the same topic is very beneficial. I enjoy seeing how two different people approach the same thing differently. So don't be afraid to piggyback on somebody else's success. And Skillshare is not going to frown on you for doing that either. In terms of actually teaching, I think you need to practice. It's not something like my first class. I cringe when I go back and watch those videos because of how monotone I was, how boring I sound. Like I've developed kind of an energy that I like to put across in my tutorials now, where I feel like if I am excited, again, the student is going to be excited. So if I'm just talking monotone, I'm going to open up the composition and add, this solid, like that's not fun to listen to. I want to make content that other people are going to want to listen to. And that was actually something from the start I set out to do, which is funny because I was nowhere near as successful in my first class as I am now at making content that was just super engaging. Because I learned from YouTube and Andrew Kramer, and he was like the pinnacle of tutorials. And there were so many people on YouTube that were like, they had no incentive to put any effort into their tutorials, but I couldn't stand it when, somebody had a cold and they were sniffing their nose every 5 seconds, or they're like, I don't know, there's just background noise, or they put no effort into the content. Skillshare, because I'm making money off of it, I am very incentivized to make high quality content that people want to watch. So I think that's something that you should go into it thinking about. You want to get a decent microphone. If you're going to be on camera, you want to get some kind of a light setup, something that looks nice. You just want to be able to have as much of a production value as you can. And I think students receive that well. In terms of outlining your content, I mean, that really depends on the topic. But I think that let's go back to talking about the length of the class, because like you said, you've heard that maybe not making classes super long is more beneficial. That's at least, I mean, I probably would have thought the same thing, except that hasn't been my experience at all. I have a couple classes that are 3 hours long and they do fantastic. They're some of my best classes. And I think it all comes down to what you're putting into the class. And the policy that I've lived by or taught by is to just have 100% content. Don't have any fluff. Don't put anything in there that's going to be boring that people are going to want to skip around or wait, hoping for the next section to start. As long as what you're putting into the video or the tutorial is stuff that is actionable and things that they're going to be learning from, and it's something that's engaging, then I don't think length really is an issue. Now, I don't think you should make a 10-hour course, but 2-3 hours is no problem as long as the entire thing is actually teaching material.
Yeah, and they're like split up into sort of chapters almost, aren't they, in Skillshare?
Right. Yeah, I should mention that on Skillshare, the videos range between probably 5 and 20 minutes each. And they're kind of like, I just chapter them off in 2 sections. So like the latest class I made was on text animators. And so I, had the basics of text animators. And then I go a little bit deeper and I talk about this feature and break it up into videos so that students can easily jump between each one of them. Sometimes I do outline the course so I know ahead of time what those video sections are going to be. Other times I just have an outline of all the points that I know I need to teach in this course. And then I just decide in the edit where I'm going to break the videos up based on just how long it took me to teach each thing. But that is another point that I should probably make, is that I do edit all of my classes heavily, like very, very heavily. Anytime that I say, anytime that I deliver a line that I feel like wasn't 100% clear or worded well, or I kind of stumbled off, I'll re-record that line. I'll just keep saying it until I feel confident and I've synchronized, what I'm doing on screen with what I'm saying. I'm kind of a perfectionist in that way. So there is a lot of editing. There's probably almost, if not more, editing than there is recording.
How long does it take you, say, if you're going to make a class on Skillshare, from outlining it to recording it and all the editing and stuff? Do you work on it for like whole weeks, or are you doing it around stuff, things like that?
I'd say even on a longer class, I'd say that I could start to finish, if I had the convenience of being able to sit down on Monday through Friday, I could finish an entire class in 1 week. From outlining the course, in a text document, knowing exactly what I'm going to teach, to recording, editing, uploading, and marketing, like all of that could be done in 1 week span if I really sat down and did it. I have 2 kids, a 3-year-old and an 11-week-old. So my schedule's not set up where I just have work hours like that. So it's nowhere near that consistent anymore. But back when I started, yeah, I could come up with an idea on Monday and on Friday have a completed course.
Wow. So it can be quick, but then that's quite a lot of hours as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it really does, again, depend on, the class topic and the length. Like the beginner's class that I did is only 30 minutes long. And I knew it was going to be a short class because I didn't want to overwhelm that type of student. So, I could make that in a couple of days. But like a 3-hour class, yeah, that's probably going to take a whole week. Maybe a day and a half to record, and then another day and a half to edit everything. So yeah, from like conception to publish, probably a full week.
Yeah. So are you kind of almost working on this full time now then, or are you still doing freelance stuff?
I currently am not freelancing, and that's kind of the next shift in my career. I was freelancing all the way up until probably halfway through 2018. And at that point, I started making another course for School of Motion, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about. But at that point, I was making enough on Skillshare between my wife and I that was going to pay the bills and make us enough money to support our family for the time that I would be making the course for School of Motion. So I told all my clients, I'm not accepting work for the rest of the year, because that also, the launch date of that course for School of Motion lined up with our second child being born. And I, for the first time in my freelance career, had the luxury of saying, you know what, at the end of October when our baby's born, I'm just not going to work for the rest of the year. So I told all my clients mid-year 2018 that I was booked basically for the rest of the year. Talk to me in January. And I built that course and I took the rest of the year off. So obviously that's not something that a lot of people have the luxury of doing. And teaching online is 100% the reason why I'm able to do that at all.
That's really exciting that you can do that. Do you think if someone wanted to get into this, whether it was like doing it full time or even like as sort of an alternative revenue stream for their freelance business, do you think that's like a viable option now?
I absolutely do. I think that consistency is key. Even if you're a freelancer full time right now and you're taking clients left and right, if you can work it into your schedule and your budget, working off of maybe one less client a month and dedicate a week of time to building a course once a month, you're going to be like in a year, you're going to have a following on Skillshare. If your content is quality and people are connecting with it, you're going to get better every time that you make a course. And that's how you build a following on Skillshare, or really any platform. YouTube especially is consistency. As long as you're putting out content regularly, that's what people are going to come back for. And it's a snowball effect. Like, that's why Skillshare has become so viable for me, is because even my very first class is still making me money now, because every class that I post just builds on the last one. More people discover it. The people who've taken my past classes are taking the new ones. And my royalty pool percentage is just growing every month because I have more minutes of content being watched. So for me, that's kind of how I transitioned from freelancing full-time to now teaching full-time, was just kind of slowly taking less and less freelance work as I took more and more time to teach classes, until it got to the point where I was making enough money from teaching that I didn't need freelancing anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you ever worry about like being too far out of the industry? Like if you're not like dealing with clients every day and stuff like that?
Yes, absolutely. I have thought about many times, like, what if in 5 years, like, I haven't taken a single client and what I'm teaching isn't really applicable anymore? And I mean, I don't really have an answer to what's going to happen if that's how it plays out. But I don't see any shortage or like any tapering off of people wanting to learn things. So I feel like we're kind of in a really cool time of e-learning, all this online education that's accessible to so many people now, not just, a small classroom of people. I'm able to reach tens of thousands of people, or on Skillshare, millions of people, just by uploading a class every month or 2 months. And I think that's just growing. Skillshare, I know their stats very well. So their platform has been exploding, and they're, I think, over 3 million users in their database right now. And they're just growing. Same thing with School of Motion. They've been exploding over the last few years, and I don't see that slowing down anytime soon. So I feel like there's a need for teachers.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, obviously, you're quite unique. There's not that many people doing it. Like, we see a lot of people on YouTube doing tutorials and stuff. They generally don't have their faces on the camera. Do you think that's something that's important?
I go back and forth with that because I have a YouTube channel as well. And I've chosen to do an intro where I'm on camera in this room, for every video. And then I do an outro. I think I enjoy watching vloggers on YouTube. There are a lot of people that I follow on a regular basis, and I like how they talk to the camera as if they're talking to me. I connect with them like in that way. So I figured those YouTubers are successful, which means that they're following, like me, probably enjoy that kind of sense of connection. So I decided I'm going to do that with my YouTube tutorials as well. On my Skillshare classes, I don't think I've ever taught a class where I was on camera. A lot of times in the class trailer where I'm explaining what the class is about, I'll be on camera for that sometimes. In this last class, I think I was on camera at both the beginning and the end of the class. I guess I haven't noticed a huge, like, that isn't a tipping point for how well the class does. I just think it's a nice touch. So I do it when I can. A lot of times it is, obviously it's more of a hassle in the production because I'm on camera. So I have to worry about lighting and how I look. And if I don't have the camera on, I can be in my sweatpants and not care if I've showered or not. And nobody will ever know. But I definitely think, again, that goes back to the whole idea of production quality. It just ups the content quality and makes that connection with the student a little bit more personal.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like you say, on YouTube and stuff, it can make you stand out as well. I feel like you're kind of looking at the platforms and seeing what works for each platform, basically.
Right. Actually, I should mention that on School of Motion, I've taught 2 courses for them now. I was on camera the entire time. So you see me in a little window down in the course, like lessons. I have After Effects is what you're mainly watching, but we basically made it look like I have my own little panel in After Effects that my little video window sits in. And that was something Joey, who runs School of Motion, we kind of just had a discussion. He decided that was something he wanted because he does like the ability to, like, if I have to explain something where I'm taking my hands off the mouse and keyboard to explain something to you, it's a lot nicer if I can look at the camera and talk to you directly and then go back to working in After Effects.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, let's talk about the School of Motion courses. Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, that was, I took School of Motion's animation boot camp. Let's see, that would have been, I feel like right before or right after I went freelance full time. I think it was right after I went freelance full time, because I was like, well, if I'm going to do this full time, I got to get better. And this course looks amazing. It's basically advertised to who I was at that point, which was a motion designer who had no background in motion design. I just got really good at After Effects, but I didn't know anything about animation. So I took that class. It blew my mind. My work, the quality of my work improved crazily over 6 weeks. So I was like, okay, I'm taking every course they ever put out. And at that point, Animation Bootcamp was all they had. But anyway, I got into the alumni group after taking that class, and I just got involved there, posting things that I had made there. And one day, I came up with an idea for how to make a tapered stroke in After Effects using expressions on a shape layer. And I posted this little GIF in the group and showed all the little controls I built in, and it was really active. A lot of people were commenting on it and wanting to use it. And like within 24 hours, I had an email in my inbox from Joey Kornman. And the subject was like about that little tapered stroke rig. And I was like, what? Because at that point I had no connection to him other than I had taken his course, but we had no direct interaction. And he was basically inviting me to make a tutorial series on how I made that rig, teaching expressions through it. So I immediately said, yes, of course, I'll do it. And then I spent 2 weeks straight learning expressions because, to be honest, that the rig that I had posted was so hacky, and like I didn't understand expressions very well at that point. But I was like, you know what, this is how it works as a teacher. I have to learn how to do what I want to teach, and then I can teach it. It doesn't matter how recently I learned it, but that was a really great experience for me, just learning how to use expressions. And Joey told me later that that was kind of my audition to teaching for him. So they brought me on as a TA for the design bootcamp course, which I was in the beta session for. That was kind of his way of like hooking me in, because he had seen my Skillshare stuff. He hooked me in, then eventually asked me if I wanted to build a course for School of Motion. I was like, absolutely, I do. It was a dream of mine to have those type of people like Joey and the other people teaching his courses as peers. And so when he asked me to teach, I was just like, I couldn't believe it. So we spent almost a year developing a course called Explainer Camp, where we teach the entire process from you get a script from the client for a 30-second explainer video, how to handle, mood boards and animatics and voiceover sessions and music and all of this, the entire process through animation and final delivery over 6 weeks of course content. And like I said, it almost took an entire year to make because it was such a complex course with so many different, moving parts that had to be figured out in podcasts. And we got to talk to some amazing people, and it all came together, probably 8 months of work. And then we did a beta session, and then we launched, and that was just an awesome experience. Since then, I've taught one other course called Photoshop and Illustrator Unleashed, which has been going for a couple of sessions now. I think we launched it at the end of October, just before my daughter was born. But that is a beginner's intro course to Photoshop and Illustrator with motion design in mind. So it's for people who have no experience at all in Adobe software, could take it and learn Photoshop and Illustrator as they get into motion design. Or it could be for motion designers who aren't using Photoshop and Illustrator to their full potential in their projects. Like if you're designing everything in After Effects, you're doing it wrong. and that's kind of what we're trying to correct with that course, is not only showing you how to use those two programs, but also showing you how they're both necessary. What Photoshop is good for, what Illustrator is good for. Because if you're like me, I hated Illustrator because I learned Photoshop first, and Illustrator was different, so therefore it was bad. I didn't like it. And I'm super thrilled to be, at this point, knowledgeable enough in both pieces of software to be able to teach it in a way for people who've never experienced it, hopefully in a way that they can come out of it seeing the benefits of both and not being confused coming out the other end.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was exactly the same way. I learned Photoshop and I was like, no, Illustrator is horrible. But now I hardly ever use Photoshop and I'm always using Illustrator. So, yeah, exactly the same thing happened to me. Totally didn't realize that it took almost a year to build the School of Motion classes. I mean, obviously they probably vary, but that's like a long time.
Yeah, I think that was probably the longest. I can't say that for certain, but probably one of the longest courses that it took to make, just because of how massive a topic it was. Usually, like Animation Bootcamp focuses on animation principles, Design Bootcamp focuses on design principles. And this course, Explainer Camp, just touched on so many things. And on top of that, usually in a course, you'll watch the teacher make something and then you make something very similar. In this course, I'm making a 30-second explainer video from start to finish, and then you get to pick one of 3 prompts or one of 3 briefs that are fake clients that we made up and make your 30-second explainer video along. So we had to make these 3 fake clients with 3 fake scripts, 3 fake voiceovers that we had to get professional voiceover recorded for. It was just a massive, massive project. So it took a while.
Yeah, I think Explainer Camp is really interesting. Like, I haven't took it or anything, but it's always one that I'm like, that's interesting. Because that's basically like how we get jobs most of the time now, right? And like what a lot of people are doing in the industry is doing these kind of explainer videos for different clients. And especially if you're working direct to client and things like that.
Right.
When was the last time a client paid you late, or you wanted to charge for project files but didn't know how? Most of the issues we face in our businesses as motion designers can be solved with good communication. The best way to communicate your terms upfront to the client and ensure your project runs smoothly is to have a solid contract in place. In talking to motion designers, I know that most are either not using a contract at all or have cobbled together one from various online sources. I get it. Lawyers can be expensive and you just want to get on with what you do best, which is making great work. That's exactly why I created the Freelance Contract Bundle. Designed in collaboration with lawyers from both the UK and the US, the Freelance Contract Bundle is a set of downloadable contract templates made specially for motion designers and animators. It includes a commission contract and a freelance terms of service contract, helping you create smoother relationships both direct to client and also while working with agencies and studios. To find out how the Freelance Contract Bundle can help protect your business, your work, and ensure your projects run smoothly, go to motionhatch.com/contract. Now let's get back to the episode. So yeah, why would you use Skillshare or like do a course of School of Motion rather than doing a course on maybe your own website or platform?
That's a great question. I mean, again, I was kind of thrown into Skillshare, but I'm glad that that's the way that I got into teaching, because just based on what I've seen, it's so much work to market classes yourself. And I'm sure you have experience with this because you're running your own website and you're running your own podcast. There's so much that you have to do to get it in front of people. Whereas on Skillshare, I build a course. They have a user base of 3 million people that they can then market the class to for me. And it's in their benefit to market my classes to them because it's going to make them money if I do well, just like it's going to make me money. So if I make a class that does really well, or it does well enough, it can work its way into a newsletter or into a weekly class recommendations email that gets sent out kind of like a personalized email to every user and gets in front of people. And that's marketing that I didn't have to do. That's just built into their platform. They have a huge team of people that are doing that for me already. Yes, they do get a cut of what I'm making, but I wouldn't have anywhere near the amount of reach on my own platform if I was doing it through my own website. I probably wouldn't make it to 3 million, but I think I have around 40,000 followers on Skillshare. And it would probably take me a while to build that kind of a following independently. So that's why I would teach on Skillshare or suggest that you'd go to someplace like Skillshare rather than starting your own business, unless that's something that you're really, really dedicated to and in for the long haul. But if you're just like, I want to try teaching, just use somebody else's marketing to your own, like leverage that marketing power. It's a lot less work.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's kind of 2 sides to that I sort of comes to mind for me. One is you're totally right about the marketing thing. And I think that if you were to build your own website and audience and things like that, you probably would have to do a lot of stuff on YouTube for free before you would be making any money. Whereas if you do something like on Udemy or Skillshare, you're kind of going to make money a little bit quicker, even though I guess if you build your own audience, there's different ways that you can utilize that.
Yeah. And that actually brings up a point that I should mention. Like on Skillshare, I can't really advertise my School of Motion classes to that audience because it's kind of a conflict of interest. And I didn't get in trouble, but I posted that tapered stroke expressions tutorial that I made for School of Motion to my Skillshare following. And I figured that would be no problem because it's on their free section. It's not taking money away, but they kind of saw it, like I said, as a conflict of interest. And they kind of gave me a slap on the wrist, nothing major or anything. They basically just said, don't do that again. It's not a big deal, but let's not advertise other people's e-learning platforms on ours, which makes total sense. I just didn't think about it at the time. And that's actually part of why I started a YouTube channel. I live in Denver, and Matt Jilka, who runs Mount Mograph, lives here too. So we've actually become friends, and he has convinced me to start my YouTube channel so that I can basically say whatever I want, advertise whatever I want to my audience. So unfortunately, that's kind of the lowest priority teaching wise between School of Motion, Skillshare, YouTube. It's like when I have absolutely nothing else to do, I will make content on YouTube. But even just the few tutorials that I made have been received really well. I really enjoy doing it, but it's purely just to build an audience there that I can talk to freely. I don't plan on ever running ads on it because, again, with conversations with Matt and other people who have YouTube channels that are pretty successful, it's really, really difficult to make money through ads and much more successful to market things to that audience that you build on that platform and make it in another way. So maybe making some presets and selling them to your audience, or if you're like Adam Pluff, then make rubber hose and sell it. But I'm not at that level. So not there yet, but that's why I have a YouTube channel.
Yeah, sure. Or like digital products and stuff like that. Like, because
Right.
obviously I have some experience with digital products, not that much experience with YouTube just yet, but thinking about it, this might
Yeah.
be on YouTube a little bit one day. You never know. I might do like a little roundup or something. You've sold some stuff on Adobe Stock. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how motion designers can make money doing that?
Sure. Yeah, that was another thing that I kind of just fell into because Adobe reached out to me just before they started making Mogurt's motion graphics templates available through Adobe Stock. And they asked if I wanted to participate, which again was one of those moments where I was like, yes, I do. And now I have to learn how to do it. And I taught myself how to make motion graphics templates. But I made a series of, I think, 6 different templates that were all kind of part of the same graphics package. So like a text bubble here, a lower third, a transition pack. 3 out of the 6 got approved. There were some issues with the expressions in the other 3, and it was around the holidays, I think. I just never got around to fixing them. But those 3 templates started selling, and I would just in my email every day or two get a notification that, hey, one of your templates sold. Here's a few dollars. And before I knew it, I had like probably $450 sitting in my account for 3 templates that I spent a couple of days making. And I was like, wow, like I'm crazy busy with my freelance and my teaching, but this could totally be another viable source of income if I actually put effort into making nice packages of graphics that work well and they're flexible and dedicated some time every month to this. It would be just like Skillshare, where it'd be a growing library of things that I'm making royalties off of. So that's something that I've always had on my radar of like, man, I got to get back to Adobe Stock and make a few more templates. And I've just never had the opportunity to jump back in. And part of that is also because my wife's classes on Skillshare, like I help her produce all of those. She's just the teacher basically, and she's making the content, but I'm the one editing them and putting it all together for her. But on top of that, she started selling digital goods on Creative Market. So she got into actually font making and font design. And it's kind of a partnership in that regard too, because she'll design the font and then I'll translate that into an actual font file. So I have my hands in a lot of different projects, but she's made a couple of fonts and those have done really well on Creative Market. And they have a great sales conversion where I believe you make 80% of every sale. You determine the cost and then you make 80% of every sale, which is fantastic. That is a way higher percentage than basically anywhere else I've seen online. And it's a digital good. So it doesn't cost you anything but the time to make it. There's no materials that you're having to pay for or, any cost for, like, if you're printing t-shirts through Society6 or something, they're obviously taking a big chunk because they're having to physically make your goods before it gets delivered. Creative Market is not that way. So I think that's how they can give you more of a percentage. And since then, she's done other things like making brush packs for Procreate on the iPad. And again, that is another one of those sources that just has a huge potential for making money. So as a freelancer motion designer, I think that that's a great opportunity for those points in the month where you have lulls. If you're trying to find work and you're not getting any responses, that's like the perfect time, I would think, to start just designing really nice templates to sell on stock sites. It doesn't have to be Adobe Stock. There's Envato or Video Hive that you can sell stuff through there. Or if you are a designer, you use Procreate or make fonts, anything like that. Just browse Creative Market or other websites like that and see what's selling, what is really popular, and see if that's something that maybe you want to try doing. Because again, it doesn't cost you anything but the time that it takes to make it, and then potentially could start making you some nice residual income.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. And it's not something that people think about. They're normally, when they don't have work, they think about personal projects or, trying to reach out to clients and stuff like that, which is also great things to do. But building something that can give you a bit of passive income on the side, I think is really smart. And also like diversifying your revenue streams is really smart too. So where can people find you and your classes?
Well, you can find me on social media anywhere at Jake in Motion. That's my handle for everything. So YouTube, Instagram, Dribble, Vimeo, all of that. You can find my website, jakeinmotion.com. And on Skillshare, you can find all of my classes at skillshare.com/Jake Bartlett, or just go to the courses on School of Motion and just browse their courses. You'll see Explainer Camp and Photoshop and Illustrator Unleashed, and hopefully some more in the future.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much again to Jake for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And thank you for listening all the way to the end. I really appreciate you all out there listening and sharing the episodes. If you want to share the podcast or give us any feedback, we are at Motion Hatch on Instagram and on Twitter. I really, really love seeing all your messages. It really, really helps me continue to do these podcasts and continue to help you guys with the business side of things. So I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a fantastic week. Thank you so much again. See ya.